Hi. Thanks very much for the nice intro. And I'm going to just talk about local storage. I don't know if any of you guys have used local storage for anything before. You raise your hands if you have. Okay, cool. Quite a few people. It's a really simple API, and it's really overlooked, and it's also overused, I think, for some things that it shouldn't be. But I'm giving this talk because I saw on Twitter someone said there's not enough introductory level talks, so I put my name forward. It's not going to be very involved, but I had some experience with local storage that I found very interesting. I fell into some traps that other people might have. It seems like a really cool and simple tool to use for a lot of things, and I think a lot of people do use it really well. But firstly, a little bit about myself. Sorry, I have great slide transitions. I had no idea. I apologize for those in advance because I am a front-end developer and I should have looked at that. So as Richard said, I work for a company called SweepSouth. We create a platform that connects people with other people who provide a specific type of home cleaning that we facilitate. We believe it's a kind of dignified work, and it allows them to provide for themselves and for their families. We touch a lot of people's lives, and I'm very proud of that work that we do. We launched another new product called Connect. That's in early beta phase. All of our products at the moment are, our mobile products are React Native, our web products React using Next.js. All of this stuff's really divorced from the platform, and I find in my day-to-day experience, it's a lot of extra work. It's a lot of jumping through hoops to do things that you could oftentimes do with just the browser. The platform's more than enough. My job title is technically a UX engineer, which is one of those job titles that you get when someone's looking for a job and they don't really know what this person needs to do, I think. And it makes sense in my day-to-day work. I'm basically a front-end developer, but we have a small dev team. I do a lot of weird things. Well, not weird. I do a lot of front-end related things. Yeah, when I started, we were very small. We're growing. As I say, I do some stuff that's product designy, some UX stuff. So I'm going to talk to you today about some adventures and misadventures I had with local storage, why you should use it and why you shouldn't use it. What I initially used it for was I had a project I was given when I first arrived. Like, oh, we want to revamp our booking funnel. It was built 5 years ago. And it was built, I think, as a prototype that the founder made, and then it went live. It was using jQuery. It was built in Django. I think it used a lot of templates and stuff. It was really quite dated. So I was tasked with, bring it into our Next.js app. Then this is what we used to do, something like that. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with that dialogue. You've exited our booking process. You're leaving our single-page app. Are you sure you want to do that? We're going to lose all the app state. I really didn't like this. I thought it's just like, please don't leave the app. You're going to lose everything we've done. I can't handle this. Just don't. Like, are you sure you want to ruin everything for me? And I got into a thing about it. I was really like, I need to defeat this. I need to find a better way. And the way I went was very involved. I used local storage and I used React. And so we're using Next, which is on the server side and the client side. So it's doing this nice server-side rendering, but local storage is available in the browser. It's on the window, which is not available on the server. So you get yourself into this huge loop of like complication. And I really fell into some pitfalls there. But why do we want to save user data in the first place? Like, what do I want to achieve with this? We start this booking process, and you enter all this information. And one of the principles of progressive web apps and actually developing for the web is that user inputs kind of suck. Typing is really, really lame. We don't want our users to sit there and just type. We want them to get the quickest possible experience of our product. We want them to go through this and have an amazing experience. So we reduce inputs. We're like, oh, we don't need that information. We can infer this. If we were collecting something like an ID number, we could infer birth dates and things like that. Not that we collect that, but for example. So we need to save some information about this user, in my opinion. I had an experience when I was very young, when I was first working on computers and I was using Microsoft Word. I wrote a whole essay, the computer crashed. Things like this happen all the time. Your browser window closed because you forgot that you were busy doing this and you decided to update because you're an early updater. And then you lose all this information, or you get a lovely pop-up that says, oh, please don't update your browser right now. You were actually busy with me. And people aren't always concerned with what you need. So I decided, oh, okay, what I'm going to do is when a person's in the process of booking, I'm just going to flush that app state into local storage at the end of whatever I deemed was the end of when it was a great time. Turns out it wasn't always a great time to be doing it, and I was blocking the main thread just because I was like, this is more important. But you know, you live and you learn. So what is web storage? What am I interacting with when I use the local storage API? That is the question. It's basically built into every single major browser. It's a store of key value pairs. Very simple, but it only stores string data. That's the whole drawback that some people often highlight, and it's something that you can actually overcome really, really easily. But it's not you shouldn't necessarily do that. There is a benefit to local storage over something like cookies. Cookies is only 4 kilobytes in size, and you're sending it back and forth with every HTTP request. In preparing this talk, I actually realized we're still doing that for something like we show a promotional offer on our SweepSouth website for first-time users. And we store that in a cookie. And then we subsequently send that cookie back and forth with every single unrelated request. It just seems like, in many cases, local storage is a better place for that. It persists in the browser forever until you clear it or they clear their cache, which normal users don't ever really do. Developers will do it whenever they're working with service workers or local storage or anything in the application panel of the dev tools, any caching, basically. So there's also a session storage API, which is interacting with the same store. This will be cleared at the end of browser session, which means it will persist refreshes, but on browser close, it's gone. It may be useful for something else that you're trying to achieve. So the other really cool thing about this web storage is that it's per origin, which means that if you had 2 browser windows open for some reason and you change your local storage, that's in both. It's in the storage which is used by both browser windows. But we'll do a little bit more on that later. Right now, what exactly is the API? I'm so glad that I don't have to look at that transition, and I'm so sorry you guys have to. Like, I just catch it out of the corner of my eye, and I can't apologize enough. Okay, cool. Let's do it again. So this is basically it. Okay? You set an item by giving it a key and giving it a value. You retrieve it by getting the item. You remove it by providing the key and removing it. And you can clear all of the local storage entries, which is really rude because you don't know if someone else needs something in there, particularly other developers that are working on your site. Then, as I said, you can only store strings, but you can get around it super easily using JSON stringify and JSON parse. We'll see an example that I know uses this later, which is very cool. I don't know if you saw, there was a recent video put up by Google on the Google developers channel about that one weird JSON parse trick, which was actually talking about how quick JSON parse is. Essentially, you could use it to parse a stringified object if you needed initial app data. So if you initialize some kind of store that you have, and you have this big object full of key value pairs, and in your JavaScript you have it, it's actually quicker to have it converted to a string and then to parse it. It's quicker for the parser to read. You can go check that video out. It's very, very cool. It's very interesting. Proceed anyway. Oh, okay. So we're missing a slide that's quite important to this. Basically, as I was saying, it's the local store is per origin. So if you have two browser windows open, they have access to the same local store if they're on the same origin, which means that you can actually add an event listener to the storage event. I did have a code example. That slide's not loading, but this is what is in that event. So you would add an event listener, it's the window. The string that you pass is storage, just storage, small letters. You receive a key of the item that's been changed, the new value, the old value, and then two properties that you don't really need to worry about so much, but they're in there as well. So if you go on MND, there's an example that they provide you, which is, like all great examples of APIs, really, really trivial. What they allow you to do is open one window and select a color and a font style and another item. I can't even remember what it is, maybe font size. And then in another window, you'll see the changes reflected and the things that you just changed in the other window displayed as text. So I have got some browser support statistics for you, which are on the next slide, Okay, so there we go. Lovely. We have a nice spread of green. So much green. I bet you've never seen so much green. And then, sorry, I'm blazing through it because I love the animation. This is web storage, the actual web storage name value pairs that you can use. That's the support for that. Then we have the window API, which is local storage. So window.localStorage, window.sessionStorage, they are the API for interacting with web storage. You can just write local storage because the browsers are really smart and they assume, and just because they've been built that way. We support like really, really, really unnecessary amounts of things. So I actually had support problems, can you believe it, with web storage. So I did some digging, and I found that there are actually some libraries that will assist you with this. There are two that I found. I used this one. It was really cool. It's basically just add it and forget about it. It will cover any cases that you want to cater to. I'm talking really old Android phones and that kind of thing. I don't, in general, I'm very much on board with what Mike's been saying earlier, which is to use the platform, and adding external dependencies to cater for these things is kind of unnecessary. I found another one here that you can use that I also think is unnecessary. They basically all just do this. They find out if you can use local storage. This is a function that you can get off MND. It's catering for like a bunch of things, and if you want to use a library because you don't feel like having all of this in your code base, fine. If you want to use this, fine. It's like just catching all that weird stuff that you would never think of because you don't ever use these old browsers. I'm sure a lot of you work in places where you need to support browsers that you don't even have access to. Oh, please make sure you fix this bug on IE10 and no one has a Windows computer. How you use that function is like that. If local storage, use local storage, else do something else. Generally, you can just say if you don't have local storage, tough luck, your experience is a little bit worse. You don't have to. You can come up with alternatives. You can use the libraries I showed you. It's really on a per case basis. And what I will say a lot in this talk is that local storage needs to be used for a specific need that you have, and you need to think about what you're trying to do with it. Don't just shove stuff in there. I say that because I basically just shove stuff in there, and it caused problems, and you learn. So there's other libraries that use local storage. This one's called Brownies. I have no knowledge of it, but it's kind of cool. Everyone seems to just like take things and then make them promisified, and you can use, I think this library allows you to use two different ways. You can use then, the dot then, or you can actually use it as a promise. It's really unnecessary, but sometimes you just want to play with things and see what's out there. So in my research, in my learnings about local storage, I found this blog post by this dude, and he is really mad about people using local storage. Like really, 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 really unnecessarily mad about it. I couldn't believe it. Like even the points he makes them with such fervor and anger towards, what are you doing? Using local storage for everything. And I think in some way he has really, really good points. But the reason I want to highlight this is the most important point is that local store, that web storage, that's accessible via JavaScript. That's how you put stuff in there. So that makes it vulnerable to cross-site security issues, cross-site scripting, which means that you can't really put anything sensitive in there. It's for publicly available things, fairly trivial things. Not to say that trivial things can't improve the user experience. It's more a case of not storing sensitive information. You shouldn't be storing really credit card information anywhere. You shouldn't really store your JWT tokens there, which is something that is recommended to do by a ton of libraries. Secure cookies have the advantage for that kind of thing, for authentication. Much more important to use that kind of secure channel for your authentication, and to use local storage for, let's say, delightful little perks of your user interface. I found some really cool examples from it. And it's not something that you can Google. You can't just Google, oh, who's using local storage? I know this because I tried. And the result was a post from 2010. And I don't know if you guys have looked at websites from 2010 anytime like since 2010, but they're really, 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 really dated. It's like the web does not age well. They say code ages like milk, not like wine, and so do user interfaces, like really, really, really. So this is a blog I read quite often. It's Dan Abramov's blog. It's called Overreacted. He deals with React things. It's very cool. If you use React, it's great to check out. And this is what he's using local storage for. Not even using it really in an opaque way or in a great way. If you toggle the button at the top that changes the theme, he saves it in the local storage and literally calls it theme and says light. And he just leaves that there forever. So is that bad? No, not really. It's really, really trivial. Has it provided something great? Yeah, I think so. If you changed to dark theme, which everyone tends to do, and then you left and forgot about it and came back the next time you read a blog post, he remembered. That's cool. What a nice, thoughtful guy. But he really didn't do anything. He just chucked it in there and he forgot about it for basically ever. I don't even know. Maybe he doesn't even know he implemented that. This is another great blog that I follow. Tobias Arlen, really hot surname. He used to work for Spotify and then Minecraft and then someone else. He did something also really, really cool. He just when he gets his blog posts, he stringifies that data and shoves it in there. And I thought, like, okay, that's kind of bad. That's kind of what I thought you shouldn't be doing with local storage, like, oh, just putting a whole object in there. By the way, super cool trick, just make your array that you need into a value in an object, and then it can go there, because you couldn't just shove an array in. There's no array stringify, unfortunately. Oh, sorry. Getting a bit carried away. So what does he do with this? He just stores it there forever. It's already displayed on the page. Surely it's in some kind of local state of his app that he's using. Why does he need it here? I didn't realize until I searched on his site, he is actually searching that. Rather than make a query somewhere else, he just searches what he locally has already. As I said earlier, JSON parse is really quick, and he's got that data there. If you come back again, or if you somehow get to his search page directly, that's there, he can just search that first. He could probably query an updated list in the background and provide results instantly while you wait for the background task to complete, and then just update it silently. This is the kind of stuff that I think provides a really cool user experience and doesn't really do any harm. You have to remember that updating the local store a lot is going to block the main thread. This is what I found out the hard way. I essentially implemented a solution where I was checking my local app state and just flushing it to the local store all the time. And then whenever you came back to the site, I remembered wherever you were in the booking process, which it really worked, and I went at pains to make it work. And the reason that I would advise against that kind of thing is because whenever you're going to real pains to do something, something's probably wrong in your application. You're probably not doing something right. It's really easy to do something wrong in React because React's super opinionated, but local storage isn't. It's simple. You saw the API. It's super, super straightforward. So use it by all means, but think about what you're using it for. Right, so when you look for stuff about local storage on the internet, there's not much, but you get results for IndexedDB. And that's because IndexedDB is super useful for more extensive storage solutions, kind of like for what I was trying to do, and for your progressive web apps. It's a whole nother talk, talking about IndexedDB, but it's notoriously complicated of an API to interact with it, which is why people would tend towards using local storage. You can use this library, which is there's instructions on Google's developer resources for how to use this library to interact with IndexedDB. Makes it a hell of a lot easier. It's still quite a lot of typing. And what I found really interesting while I was preparing for this talk is this library was actually used by a couple of developer advocates in their talks when they were showing the kind of stuff that they'd done with progressive web apps. What does this do? It allows you to use IndexedDB with the local storage API. It looks the same. It uses local storage when IndexedDB is not available in a browser, but that's pretty much all it does. Is it provided a wrapper to use that really simple API, and it will do. If you are storing to local storage, it will do the stringify and the parse for you. If you're using IndexedDB, which would be the default, it does all that complex stuff for you, and it will be asynchronous, unlike local storage is. So we've blazed through my slides because I don't have any speaker notes to expand upon what I'm talking about, because I have encountered serious technical difficulties. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to chat a bit more about this. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
One thing you touched on briefly was the danger of clearing the local storage, because you might mess with somebody else's storage for your application if you're working on a team. And my question is basically, what kinds of conventions or structures do you have in place to prevent people doing just like nasty stuff with each other's state? I mean, I'm sure that you have some. There must be some pattern about how to do this in a robust way on a larger app.
So the thing is, if you're using this in a system, the first thing that you'll have to assume is that it's not there. Your local storage might just not be there at all, because you're going to save something there if you have it, and then use it if you have it. Basically, you would need to use that information only if it's there. If it's not there, just carry on as normal. In terms of a large app, I really don't think that there's any need for this to be doing something very important. It's the kind of thing that it's useful for is rather smaller, trivial things, or if you're in a development environment or if you're learning, it's a great resource to have. It's like something that you can hook up as a browser-based database, or you can use IndexedDB using something like this, or IndexedDB using a different library. it's not something that large-scale apps use that I've seen mostly. However, what's quite fun is to go into the browser and just check every now and again if someone's using local storage. Some of them do. A lot of guys will make it a bit more opaque as to what they're doing. They'll sort of hash things or use a lot of keys. I think YouTube uses it, and I can't figure out what they're doing with it. I absolutely cannot. It's so obscure, what's in there. I completely forgot. I've got an example here that I was supposed to do, and I've been so flustered by my slides that I've forgotten. I don't know if we have time. Yeah, we do. Cool. Okay. Right. Sorry, I'm like flying all over the place here. I'm trying to remember what I need to do first. Okay. Let me get out of here. I mean, the presentation went so smoothly that live coding can't really go any worse, right? We might as well just go for it. So I knew there was going to be a talk on lit HTML, and it was really cool, and he used very little in terms of packages. I'm going to completely go against everything he said and just use a package to scaffold an app, because I'm sure you guys don't want to see me type out as much as Mike did, because that will go terribly. Right, so this is the OpenWC starter app. I wanted to use create lit app because that's a cool name, but it's not supported anymore, so I use this one. Oh, sure, man, that's really tiny. That's still really tiny. Cool, okay, so we're going to scaffold a new project. We'll do a whole application. We don't need any of this stuff. This is DevFest 2019. We have rules. I don't even know what that says anymore. What do you guys think it says? I have no idea what it says. Do you want to install the dependencies? Yes, with? Can I get a vote? Ooh, yarn. Should we do a shouting competition? For NPM? For yarn? NPM takes it, I'm afraid. So, like I said, this might go incredibly badly, and I've never done it before, except the times that I tested it out before I did it. Great name we got, 2019-019. Cool. Let's start it up. Great. We're back to Firefox. Excellent. So, we are learning about using lit HTML, and we have this app here. What can we do with local storage that would be interesting? The first thing I noticed was we have this classic example, incrementing a number. We hit increment a few times and it goes up, refresh the page, and we're back on step one. Cool. So how can we make that better? I'm going to open the excellently named folder that we just created. How are we doing on font size here? Super tiny, excellent. So this app lives here, I think. Excellent, that seems fun in terms of font size. Cool, so I just need to track down where stuff happens. So I think we index page main, no. Goodness me, please excuse me, I'm completely lost. I know it happened somewhere. Cool, here we go. Okay, so I basically could have just used create any app. I thought this was the most appropriate one to use. I can see where we changed page here. On nav clicked, not nav class, because that was the mistake I made the first time I did this. So we can create a new entry in local storage after we've navigated, which would be the page that we're on, which is going to be very transparent, and it's going to be this. And when we start, we want to get that item. The page would be, and we called it page, so that it was easy to remember. If there is a page entry, which was the first thing we needed to check, so we now stay where we were. Really, really easy. Now, it would be much better to have a router that actually updated the URL so that when we went back, we were at the page that we were on and it reflected the same thing. But maybe you're just learning and you're really, really, really tired of having to click page one every time you want to work on page one. So then, increment. This is going to be in page one, I hope. Ooh, 2 page ones. Tricky. Okay, this looks like this is where our counter lives, and this is where we increment our counter. So after we've incremented our counter, we can update our counter. And that would be exactly the same pattern again. Oh, sorry. That will have an incredibly interesting effect, although the button says increment, so technically it would still be operating as described. It would be an extremely good feature. I did call it counter, I hope. Let's keep our code base inconsistent. What did we start with? 5? Oh, no. Okay. Oh, we've encountered an issue. And you know what? That happened in the dry run as well, and I forgot about it. Ooh, exciting. We need to clear our local storage now because we have a problem. Exactly. Perfect. I hope Firefox wasn't using that for anything. No, there's nothing in there. Cool. And we're still there. So, oh, thank you. So, did we make this? Did we make this app better? A little bit. Was it a great app to start with? Kind of not really. I mean, it's a starter app, so I'm not meaning to throw any shade on it. But we made minor improvements that might delight a user that was using this for whatever reason. I don't think I'm going to create a pull request with this code. I don't think they'd want it. Probably wouldn't pass peer review. But we have done something, and we've demonstrated basically how that works. And I still have 29% of battery and no charger. So we've turned this around, I think. Cool. So any other questions? Yes.
Thanks. So you said you've been through a lot of good and bad sides of this. Could you give us an example of when using local storage is a bad idea and when it's a good idea? So take, for example, if you had to write the location of an advertising banner to local storage, so somebody loads it, the banner's there, then having a second process that would get the latest banner, for example. Even the guy's example about his blogs, if you had to store the last 5 blog entries and a header, maybe some content, and have a second process that updates that content. Why would either of those be a bad idea?
So the main concerns that you need to have with local storage, the important ones are that the data can't be anything that needs to be secured, which is not one of the things that you've raised, so that's fine. Second one is that retrieving items from local storage and setting items in local storage is synchronous. So that's going to block the main thread. Also, you can't access local storage in a service worker or a web worker. So those optimizations can't be done. So you've basically, if you want to use this, you need to be sure that you're not going to block other important processes. And if your app's at any sort of scale, you probably might. Even in this example here, I'm slowing down the constructor because I'm checking local storage first. It's not ideal, but this is not a very expansive app. But constructors are going to grow as your app grows. What I don't think is terrible is the way I set those items in local storage. What I've done is waited until I've actually performed the operation, that updated state, and then just done it then. So it's going to only happen after our important operations have completed. But if you want to use it, it really serves much the same purpose as cookies. It's providing a lot more storage space for things, but really it's something that you would store in a document cookie or something, you want to remember some sort of UI state. I wouldn't really store too much information that is necessary or is going to be fetched anyway. Yeah. Yep. Can you just the mic? Yeah, it's very firm.
I just want to ask, how does local storage handle cross subdomains and the actual origin? So,
So
is it accessible?
It's per domain. So on the same origin. So say, it's accessible on the same origin only. So you don't have access to Google's, for example. So that's why cross-site scripting is the only real concern.
So, for instance, if I have a subdomain on my own domain, can I access the actual local storage from my main site as well? Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
Sorry, one last question. What is the best use case you've seen so far, or something that you've really enjoyed implementing with local storage?
Basically, the two examples that I've presented is kind of the best cases that I've seen. I really think that it can be used for something like that's very small. So remembering a person's preferences on your site. Other cases that you could use it for, if you wanted to implement something really nice and really quickly, is something like an abandoned cart for a non-logged in user. You could just keep that in local storage and tag it as something, and then you're able to retrieve that and give it back to them, every time they return to your site. Cool.
Cool. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. No.
No, good stuff.
Cool.